When the dust settled on World War II, the rubble of Berlin became the ground zero for a completely new type of conflict. The United States and the Soviet Union, the two massive nuclear powers left standing, suddenly found themselves staring at each other across a divided city in total silence. There was an absolute information blackout between the East and the West. When you know nothing about an enemy capable of wiping out your civilization, extreme paranoia takes root. A single blind spot, a misplaced troop movement, or a misunderstood military drill could easily trigger a preemptive nuclear holocaust. A direct military conflict meant mutual destruction. To figure out what the other side was planning, the superpowers had to fight a secret war. They needed a way to uncover military capabilities without firing a single bullet. To prevent a sudden global apocalypse, Washington and Moscow built the most expansive and ruthless intelligence machines in human history. The survival of the human race was essentially outsourced to a global network of liars and thieves. Before satellites and digital surveillance, gathering information required physical risk. By the mid-1950s, the CIA was desperate enough to dig a massive hole straight under the Iron Curtain. They called it Operation Gold. Looking at this schematic, we can see the sheer scale of the project, a 450-meter tunnel carved directly beneath the heavily fortified border to tap into Soviet military communications. But the Americans were compromised before the first shovel hit the dirt. As we pan up, the KGB knew about the tunnel, allowing the CIA to listen in for 11 full months to protect their source. That source was George Blake, a double agent working within British intelligence. He handed the entire set of blueprints for Operation Gold directly to Moscow. This mutual deception perfectly illustrates what counterintelligence agents call the wilderness of mirrors. It was an environment so tangled in betrayal that even a massive technical achievement for one side acted as a strategic shield for the other. By 1961, the borders slammed shut. With a concrete barrier dividing the city, agents could no longer casually slip across. The espionage war had to pivot entirely towards psychological manipulation and deep human infiltration. East Germany's answer was Marcus Wolf. Looking like an unassuming academic, Wolf masterminded the Stasi's Foreign Intelligence Division, building an expansive network of human informants. His most notorious tactic was the Romeo strategy. Wolf recruited charismatic male agents and trained them to systematically seduce West German secretaries who held security clearances and access to confidential files. These operations followed a cruel progression. The agent would engineer a meeting, profess his love, and even propose marriage. Once the victim was emotionally invested, the romance evaporated into sudden blackmail, coercing the women into smuggling classified documents out in their handbags. The Stasi's reliance on human infiltration eventually reached the very top of the political ladder. They planted a sleeper agent named Günther Guillaume, who climbed the ranks until he was working inside the highest office of the West German Chancellor. The intelligence gained from these operations kept the Eastern Bloc intimately aware of NATO policies, but it relied entirely on treating the emotions, careers, and lives of innocent civilians as disposable collateral. The CIA realized they were losing the ground war of human informants. To counter the Stasi, they needed a method of gathering intelligence that didn't rely on fragile human relationships, pivoting to untouchable technological surveillance. They built their solution on the highest peak in West Berlin. This is Teufelsberg, an array of massive geodesic radomes peering deep into enemy territory. Instead of risking an agent's life to steal a single folder from a desk, the American intelligence apparatus began simultaneously intercepting up to 500,000 phone calls traveling across the Eastern Bloc. This represented the complete industrialization of espionage. Teufelsberg effectively surrounded the East with an unblinking electronic eye, analyzing raw data to map out the exact strength of the Soviet military. In November 1983, a massive NATO military drill triggered deep Soviet paranoia, convincing Moscow a preemptive nuclear strike was imminent. The threat was incredibly real. Inside East Germany, Soviet pilots were sitting in their cockpits on the tarmac, fully armed with nuclear missiles, their propellers turning, just waiting for the order to launch. The tension was ultimately diffused by the very spy networks that caused so much collateral damage. A Stasi agent embedded deep inside NATO headquarters relayed the facts back to Moscow, proving the maneuvers were only a drill and immediately bringing the Soviets back down to earth. The Cold War didn't end in a hail of nuclear fire, but in a slow economic grind. Western intelligence agencies, pulling data from listening posts and sources, tracked the inevitable financial collapse of the Soviet system in real time. The formal winding down of the intelligence war happened exactly where it started, here on the Glienicke Bridge. At twilight, captured spies were quietly exchanged across the border, walking past each other to return home. In 1989, the physical divide collapsed. Crowds of Berliners overtook the checkpoints and danced atop the concrete barrier, officially ending the era of a partitioned city and its subterranean shadow wars. The Cold War espionage machine was deeply immoral. It manipulated, imprisoned, and destroyed countless innocent lives. Yet, by piercing the deep fog of superpower paranoia, this network of spies provided the one crucial asset needed to keep the world from ending: the truth.